Okay, I don't think you guys are even going to believe this story, but it's 100% true. Just happened last week. I don't know how else I could even preface this dumpster fire of a story, but here it goes. I'm a 22-year-old male and I live with my fiancée. We had a nice apartment, but we were really looking to buy a house. I know, a little young for that, but we both landed really nice jobs after college and figured that it's better to get it out of the way now and start settling down. We're kind of old-fashioned like that. My fiancée's grandmother owns a home and no one lives in it. She had it for about a year since a family relative passed away. No one wanted anything to do with it since there was a lot of work that needed to be done, like painting the walls and redoing the floors and just various tasks like that. It wasn't completely horrible inside, but there was enough work that it literally sat there for a good little while. Well, my fiancé and I started talking to her grandmother after buying the place. She told us that she would sell it to us for a low enough price that we would be able to afford all of the renovations and whatnot. We were really excited about it. It was really exciting to think we were going to have purchased our first home together so shortly after graduating from college. But here was the problem. She had a lot of people in her family who started feeling left out. It was my fiancé's aunt and her two sons. Their father had died shortly after the second son was born, and the mother had a hard time coping with everything. She was a regular drinker and arguably an alcoholic. My fiancé told me that they were extremely negative people, and after meeting them a few times at family functions, I was surprised at how right she was. They lived in government housing. She collected disability fraudulently, and her two sons didn't work, despite one being 24 and the other being 19. There were whispers of drug abuse in there too. Suffice to know that these were not the kind of people you wanted to associate with. When word got out that we were buying the house from her grandma, they started feeling really left out. There were a few occasions where they'd try offering to watch the house, very obviously an attempt to get in there and do God only knows what. We politely declined and did everything we could to avoid them. I happened to be at the house one day. My fiancé was working and I work remotely online, so I was home alone. I had just walked down the street to buy a lemonade when I saw someone at her house. It was extremely unexpected. I got ready to confront a potential burglar when I noticed it was my fiancé's cousin trying to break in. He was startled when he saw me and froze for a minute. I asked him what he was doing, and he told me something about thinking he saw a car he didn't recognize in the driveway. I explained that it was my car, and he left without any big confrontation. As he walked away, though, I heard him start cursing under his breath. This was the point when I started feeling like we had something to worry about. Not feeling safe inside your own home is the worst feeling ever, especially being two young recent college graduates. We both worked really hard to make this happen, and the idea that it made us feel unsafe there really bothered us. I still didn't even understand what they wanted out of the whole ordeal. They didn't have enough money to afford the property tax alone. Forget about utilities and anything else. About 2 weeks went by without any kind of confrontation. I had falsely convinced myself that they'd finally leave us alone. I was dead wrong. We went to McDonald's one day, exactly 1 week ago today, the day I'm writing this. Me and my fiancé both just wanted to be out of the house for a little while. Considering we were in the process of buying a house, we didn't want to go eat anywhere expensive, so McDonald's just seemed like a logical decision. Now before I continue, I feel the need to explain something about my fiancé and I. We are normally very serious people. We work very hard and we're both kind of workaholics, but when we get together to have some fun, we go hard. Work hard, play hard, right? Well, we got kind of silly when we played. Let me cut to the chase. We were both playing in the ball pit at our local McDonald's. We always enjoyed goofing off like that, and we weren't too concerned with what people would think of us. We'd only been messing around for 5 minutes when her cousin showed up at McDonald's too. It was creepy. He walked right in, looked at us the entire time. Before he even opened the front door, his eyes were stuck on us, and they felt heavy. My fiancée immediately knew something was wrong when my facial expression changed and she darted around to see what I was looking at. We both watched as her cousin made his way out to the ball pit. He stepped outside. As he walked, he moved his body to grab something out of his pocket. I couldn't see what it was, but my first thought was a gun or a knife. The look in his eyes told me he was out to do serious harm. He jumped into the ball pit in my direction. I luckily landed one solid punch in his face as he came down. It threw him off. I had an advantage. He kicked me in the stomach, but I landed a few more punches on his face. He started screaming for me to stop and that I was killing him. I would have kept going if my fiancée hadn't been watching. He started this, not me. We got out of the ball pit. He then began telling us that he was going to press charges on me for assaulting him. I wasn't even fazed by this. There were plenty of witnesses there that had seen the whole thing transpire. I started telling him that I was calling the cops and I was going to press charges on him. He got really panicked and ran back to his car and drove off. I'm not going to lie to you. This whole thing really shook me up. I didn't know what to think. I didn't know what to do. I looked around online and found an easy solution. A restraining order. My fiancée and I had both gotten restraining orders on her aunt and her two cousins. I didn't know why we didn't think of this sooner. They really solved the issue, and once they understood that we had a restraining order against them, they buggered right off. I haven't seen or heard from them since. And thankfully, and hopefully, that's the end of my story.
Many students across the years at my school have often spread rumors about weird teachers. Well, the truth is that most of them were completely harmless. But having an odd stare, a freaky smile, or even talking to the wrong student was enough to have them deemed as creepy by the cohort of students at my school. They were usually just a select few who would pretty much gossip about anyone and everyone. But when it came to teachers, they didn't hold back. There had even been cases of teachers getting fired because of the rumors. Teachers who my older brother had been taught by years ago, saying they were some of the most wonderful people he had ever met. Or so they had appeared. The problem with repeatedly getting teachers fired without reason was that when a teacher joined the school who had actual issues, the school would likely ignore any further complaints about them, believing all the students to be spreading more rumors just for the sake of getting the teachers fired. This exact problem had happened to my year. A year that had only just escaped from lockdown, and we were returning to a school we'd never been in before. Yet we'd been a part of it for a full academic year now. We were far too naive to be able to distinguish between teachers, which made identifying them difficult, making the first few weeks back a struggle. But after a while, we became used to them, and them to us. And in one case in particular, far too close. "Morning, everybody." My English teacher, Miss Hart, a woman of around 27 years of age, only a few years out of uni and fresh out of teacher training, was doing her usual morning greeting. "Morning, miss," we all shouted back. There was a general clamor of excitement, as Miss had told us the day before that we were getting a new assistant to replace the old one which had left due to his son getting cancer. A horrific situation for such a kind man that he had been to us. "Our new teaching assistant arrives today. Are you all excited?" Her cheerful tone delighted the class, and our faces twisted into smiles of joy as we all cocked our heads towards the door, ready to see the new TA. As we turned around to face the door, there were a couple of shocked gasps as many snapped their necks away from the door to face a man sat at a desk in the far right, his glasses tinted with the blue light flashing from his screen. He noticed us all looking at him immediately and lifted his head up to sync with his eyes. He bore no expression of a smile as he looked around the room, until his eyes fell on me. His solemn face suddenly morphed into a rather sadistic smile that stabbed into me like one tectonic needle piercing through my heart. "Good morning. I look forward to working closely with you." Even Miss Hart was slightly creeped out by his estranged movement and seismic glare as he seemed to be directing his words only towards me. I was petrified, and it wasn't long before the terror escalated and Mr. Hollard grew near. "Morning, Harry. How'd you sleep last night?" It had been around 5 days since his appearance in the classroom, and since then he had consistently sat as close as he could to me in every lesson, with many lessons that came after break being sat down next to my seat, cutting me off from my friends, leaving me no choice but to sit next to him. He would plague me at first with questions about how I found the school, but then, soon enough, those questions began devolving into far more personal ones. "It was good, thanks." I responded to one of his ominous queries with haste and straightened my neck out to face towards Miss Hart, who was beginning the lesson. Around 10 minutes in, the moment we were given tasks to do the remainder for the first half of the lesson, he pounced once again. "So, Harry, got any plans this weekend?" His voice was incessantly beginning to sound almost intimidating as he peered down at my page, edging closer, pretending to examine my work. "I'm busy all weekend with my dad and brother. We're going clay pigeon shooting." That ought to scare him off, I thought. "Oh, how fun. Bring me back some shrapnel, will ya?" He chuckled to himself for a moment, and then engaged his glare once more at my quivering eyes. I subtly nodded and tried to hold my focus to my work, doing my best to avoid eye contact with this creature of a man staring into my soul. "You want to know what I'm up to this weekend?" He stared at me, his mouth slightly ajar, waiting for my response with a foul grin. "No, sir." I tried to reply plainly so he wouldn't delve into too much detail. I probably shouldn't have spoken at all. "I'm going hunting." "Yep. Me, my shotgun, and whatever damned creature finds itself in my way." I shivered at his disgusting habit. He wouldn't shut up about how much he enjoyed hunting, hiding from prey before pouncing, and most of all, he wouldn't stop discussing his 12-gauge shotgun. "Hey, you want to see the shotgun? It's a real beauty. I have it in my car." Following my instinct, I sprang up from my seat and beckoned Nis to let me leave for the toilet. I needed to get away from that freak. I had had enough of it. I swiftly made my way to the bathroom opposite and found a cubicle for me to sit down and tried to take a few deep breaths before going back out and having to listen to that vile beast heckle into my ear about his guns, his hunting, his delirious lifestyle. My blood froze as I heard the door open with a loud slam coming from the door smashing into the wall. "Harry, I know you're in here. Come with me. I want to show you how awesome my cool gun is." My nerves seized up in seconds, and I reactively hoisted my legs up off the floor so he couldn't spot them from beneath the stall doors. "Harry, I'm getting impatient. Come out quickly before Miz realizes we aren't going to the toilet." I was utterly stricken with terror at this point, and I certainly wasn't going to leave anytime soon unless he left me be. I heard footsteps slowly approach the cubicle door. It was him, that creature that come for me. And now, a thin plastic door was all that held him back from me. His heavy breathing indicated that he was ready to break his way in if he needed to. "Harry, I said come out." "Please, can Mr. Hollard come to the head's office now?" The speakers boomed down the corridors and through the closed bathroom door. Had I been saved? "I'll be right back, Harry." "Don't you dare leave now." He laughed maniacally as he exited the room. And hearing the bathroom door close once more, I launched myself out of the cubicle and returned back to Miss Hart's class, far too afraid to try and speak out about what had just happened in fear I would be deemed a liar. All because of the rumors spread around by the years before us. Some god must have been watching over me, however, as the next day I came into class and Mr. Hollard was nowhere to be seen. And the same happened the next day, and the day after, and so on until it finally clocked that Mr. Hollard was gone. Whatever had gone down in the head's office, I will never know, but it saved me from whatever twisted plot he'd been using on me to try and get me to his car. I was terrified, but not yet scarred, though I never dared to interact with another member of staff I hadn't known for the rest of school. Even now, age 30, and I still can't even fathom talking to someone new, even at work. I would be too cautious. I wouldn't let anyone else come so uncomfortably close to me again. I wouldn't risk it. I'm too afraid. Welcome. This will be where you two are going to stay for the next couple of days. We have amazing activities planned for you. Hope you're excited. Please, go take a look at your rooms and see what you think. You're over at Cabin 4. See you soon. Marquez, our host, returned to the staff shack, and my wife Elizabeth and I were left to explore our accommodation. Wow, it's beautiful, isn't it, Mark? You really paid for the whole thing? I felt slightly insulted by Elizabeth's remark, but considering just how poor we were, it wasn't a surprise she had expected a worse-off honeymoon. Luckily for the two of us, this place popped up as I was searching for honeymoon destinations abroad, and the prices were dirt cheap. It was strange that they were that cheap, considering how luxurious the place appeared to be. The accommodation was located on one of the islands under the Solomon Islands area. The sea reflected the pure blue in the sky, and the water was clear enough to see the bottom, only whilst on the shoreline. We were staying on some kind of pier further out into the sea. On the pier, there was a ring of cabins all around one large opening into the sea in the middle, and each of our cabins had a stairway leading down into the depths. Personally, I was marginally afraid of the sea. If you can't see the bottom, then how are you supposed to know what's down there? I pushed aside my fears for Beth. She grew up on a British coastal town, so the sea was like a second home to her, hence the reason why she loved the place so much. Haha, don't worry, honey. I got us a special deal on the place, so money doesn't matter. Let's go look inside, shall we? She nodded eagerly and leaned in to kiss me. She giggled after and headed inside. I followed, mesmerized by both the cabin's beauty and Beth's. Oh my, Mark! There's a back porch that has a stairway leading into the sea. That's so exciting! I'll be sure to go for a swim later tonight. I walked over towards her, admiring the crystal white bed covered in roses, with the rest of the cabin being covered in lavish furniture. Even a TV sat on the wall. I had no clue how they had any wires come out here, but however so, it was impressive for such a small price. Dear Lord, you can't even see the bottom, Beth. What if something's down there? I was shivering a little at the thought of something lurking beneath the wooden stairwell, waiting for a pair of legs to grace the platform, ready for whatever it was to latch on and devour them whole. Oh, don't be so silly, Mark. There aren't any sharks for another 3 miles out to sea. And sharks don't bother to come near resorts like this anyway, considering they hunt sharks around here. Her retort set me straight for a moment. Fine. But if you see a fin, get out immediately. And if you do go in the water, just let me know so I can come check on you. I was worried about her. We only got married 3 days ago. I certainly didn't want to lose my wife within the first week of our marriage. Maybe. We'll be together most of the time anyway, so it won't matter. Now I'm hungry. Let's go eat, she said, as we made our way outside the cabin, off towards the staff cabin to ask about food. On our way, I looked at the circle opening to the sea in the center of the cabins. It had a slight tint of red in it, and the water was only clear for a couple of meters before cutting off into the murky depths below. I was incredibly nerved by it, but hunger was our focus, so I snapped back into reality. Hey, Marquez, we just came to ask about the food situation. Do we have to wait until dinner, or is there something we can eat now? Her eyes were lit up with hopefulness. Sorry, Mrs. Rochester. Breakfast, lunch, and dinner are the only times food's served. But luckily for you, dinner here is at 5 every day, so give us 10 minutes or so and it'll be delivered straight to your shack. Beth leaped into the air out of joy, and we thanked Marquez, then returned to our cabin awaiting the food. What do you think it'll be, Mark? Beth asked me excitedly. Well, as long as it's food, I don't care too much, but I have a feeling it'll be seafood. She chuckled momentarily as we sat down on the little table and chairs inside our cabin and awaited our food nervously. We spoke for 10 minutes before finally hearing a knock on our cabin door. We opened it, and a staff member stood there bearing 2 plates with a bowl on each. He handed them to us and said, "Shark fin soup! Enjoy!" He left immediately, and we sat down to eat. "I've never had shark fin soup before," Beth stated as she picked up her spoon and began downing the liquid. "Neither have I. I don't like the sound of it," I said as I also began digging in. It wasn't terrible, but hearing how hunting sharks attracted more sharks inland towards the coasts, it terrified me. We didn't take long to eat. It was a thick substance, which made it easier to consume. And soon enough we had left our empty bowls outside, ready to be collected, and both feeling tired. We hit the bed for a nap. I woke up hearing the sound of a scream from outside the cabin. I sat up looking around me wildly for Beth. Her side of the bed had its covers flung off, and there was no sign of her anywhere around the cabin. The scream continued, and so I leapt out of bed, sprinting out the back of the cabin onto the porch to find where the screaming was coming from. It was pitch black outside, with the remaining bits of sunlight being sucked behind the horizon. There were few lights dotted around the area, but there was enough light to see a velvet red liquid pool around the stairwell leading into the sea. No. Beth! Blood and water! Nighttime! Sharks! Suddenly, the scream once again arose from the water, and I could see Beth splashing around, screeching for help. I grabbed her arm and tried hoisting her up at first, but whatever great beast was pulling her from below restricted me from hauling her out. All of a sudden, the door behind me burst open, and in rushed Marquez, followed by several staff members who had heard the screams and had come to help. Two of the staff members fortunately held harpoon guns and dove into the depths below. There was a moment of struggle as Beth wailed in agony, but then the resistance below had suddenly stopped, and we finally plucked Beth out of the water, though only what remained of her. Her entire left leg had been ripped off, and her right was badly wounded, with several teeth marks lining her calf and thigh. Marquez beckoned for one of the staff members to go and call some kind of ambulance service, which they did, and in 15 minutes a boat arrived at the docking area and Beth's mauled body was hauled aboard. I went with her, and we arrived at a small local hospital after 30 minutes or so of sailing. I held her palm in mine tightly, clutching onto her very life essence. "You'll be okay, Beth, I promise!" I followed her inside the hospital, but was restricted from entering the surgical room. There was a short period of time where I was stationed alone in the waiting room, and to my foul despair, the doctor came out and spoke the words I can never forget. "I'm sorry, sir. She's dead."